Purdue's back with a quick turnaround, a semi-quick turnaround that is, Saturday to Tuesday. They are headed out to Lincoln, Nebraska to take on the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Had a bye week in between the Maryland and the Oregon games, but threw up a little bit of a stinker from at the Oregon game. Found a way to win and now have a chance to respond with a very tough matchup in a game that if you win, there will be no complaints from anybody about a bad performance. That's for sure. Going on the road to one of the more underrated environments in the country in Pinnacle Bank Arena to take on another top 10 team in Nebraska. This is potentially the biggest game of the year for Purdue and their Big Ten championship hopes. This is to essentially stay alive in the Big Ten race, trying to keep up with Michigan, who does not seem to be slowing down anytime soon. So, Ethan, what do you think the Boilermakers' chances are looking like headed into Lincoln? Do you think they'll be able to keep pace with Michigan in the Big Ten race, or is this looking like another loss?
I'll save my official prediction for the end, but this is going to be a very tough game for Purdue to win, I think. And we'll kind of break down why. But let's start by talking about what Nebraska does stylistically. Offensively, Nebraska sort of epitomizes run and gun and shoot threes. That's what they want to do. They play super fast and they get up and down the court. And once they take a lot of transition threes, they take open 3-point shots. But they're also not afraid to slow things down, run some offense. They run beautiful sets, lots of cutting, lots of screens, trying to get open 3-point shots. They take let's see. Let me make sure. Yes, they take over 50% of their shots from three. They want to shoot threes, and they shoot them at a decently high clip. They're at over 35%, almost 36% 3-point shooting percentage-wise on the season, which is top 100. This is just a good shooting team, and Purdue's going to have to stay disciplined defensively to slow them down.
Yeah, I mean they play a lot of good shooters. Rink Mast is his percentage is down a little bit on the year, but he's largely been a good shooter throughout his career. He's slumping a little bit recently. Price Sanford's a big name. That's a name that I'm sure a lot of Big Ten fans will recognize. His older brother terrorized the Big Ten at Iowa for a few years, and Price was there with him, and then moved on to Nebraska after Fran McCaffrey moved on. Jamarcus Lawrence is another big name for Nebraska in the shooting department. He's shooting around 39%. Braden Frager, who's probably going to win Big Ten Sixth Man of the Year, shooting around 37% on pretty high volume. This is just largely a team full of guys that can make shots, and almost everyone they play can shoot. And I think that'll lead to some pretty wide open looks against a Purdue team that often gives up looks to role players. And the issue with Nebraska is those role players can shoot.
Yeah, Sanford is an unreal shooter. He's probably the best 3-point shooter in the country this year. He's shooting 40% on over 8.5 attempts per game. I mean, that's just absurd volume and efficiency. He's been fantastic. And then, yeah, you look down the list. I mean, Lawrence, Frager, Sanford, Hoiberg. I don't know if you mentioned Sam Hoiberg, coach's son, is shooting 41.5% from three on the year, almost 10 points per game. Like, this is just a team that plays a lot of guys who are efficient volume shooters, and they are not afraid to slow things down. They need to run some offense. Like I said, they cut really well. They find open looks against good defenses. Purdue's is not that. And specifically, something I've criticized, they just aren't executing switches well. They're not sticking to their men. They get lost on defense. Saw that against Oregon a lot too, especially against Indiana and Illinois. If you let Nebraska get open looks from three, they can torch you. And it'll be interesting to see how Purdue manages that. Now, on the other side of the ball, Nebraska's defense actually grades out better analytically than their offense, which might be a little surprising to people who followed, Fred Hoiberg's team at Nebraska. But this is a very, very good defense. Now, Hoiberg has always run a pretty unique scheme, and we'll kind of dive into more of that throughout the preview here. But it's a no middle defense and a pretty extreme one at that. They really pack the paint. They don't let guys drive in there. They deny post touches. 2 seasons ago, Purdue's biggest loss of the season in Zach Edey's senior year came at Pinnacle Bank Arena against Nebraska, and that's exactly what they did. They're They're a team that is super active defensively. They force a lot of turnovers. They apply pressure. They deny the paint, and they'll leave open shooters, open role player shooters, to double the ball, to pack the paint, and they're going to let guys take open shots if they have them, and it's going to be up to Purdue to make those shots.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about it like a no middle defense. It's a no middle defense, like turned up to the max and then passed where the knob can go a little bit. They are so, I mean, they just straight up will leave certain guys at times, but keyword being certain there. They are very disciplined in their scheme and they run a very unique scheme. And Purdue fans, I think, mistake Purdue's scheme at times for being very equivalent to this Nebraska scheme, when I think in reality this Nebraska scheme is a much more disciplined and well executed version of what Purdue wants to do. Purdue will leave guys at times to try and create havoc and keep the ball to the middle, but they will leave anybody. This Nebraska team is very particular and very intentional in who they leave. I'm sure you'll notice when you see them leave guys, you'll see the ball get kicked to wide open shooters, but it won't be getting kicked to Fletcher Lawyer. It won't be getting kicked to Braden Smith. It'll be getting kicked to guys like Jakari Harris, guys like CJ Cox, even, who have been around like 27% from three in conference play this year. And it's going to be kind of one of those games where if the role players for Purdue are hot and knock down a bunch of shots, that really forces Nebraska's hand, because defensively, that's the way to beat Nebraska.
Yeah, so let's break down the edges both teams might have, because I think going into this game, I would guess both offenses are going to feel like they're getting good shots. Purdue is quite comfortable with guys like Jack Benner and CJ Cox and Omer Meyer, even Jakari Harris taking open looks from three, and they're going to have them in this game. It would not surprise me to see those four players combine for 18 to 25 three-point attempts if they're willing to take open shots and they get them. And we've heard from Matt Painter, we've heard from BJ Thompson, we've heard from Braden Smith, even that's what they want those guys to do. When they're open, they trust them, they want them to take those shots, and they're going to have opportunities. And this game is going to come down a little bit to who's making their shots, because on the other end of the floor, Purdue's defense isn't going to be willing to leave Nebraska shooters as much as they're probably just going to give up open looks, because that's what Purdue's defense does against much worse offenses than Nebraska. Nebraska is going to be able to create some looks and some space. And the one thing that does play to Purdue's defense a little bit, Nebraska does not really attack the rim at all. They are one of the worst offensive rebounding teams in the country. They're somehow have an even lower free throw rate than Purdue. They don't attack the paint. Purdue has one of the worst 2-point defenses in the country right now, and Nebraska might not really punish them for it. Now, they'll be opportunistic. You know, they're a good cutting team, and they'll be open under the basket and take some looks. Rank Mass isn't afraid to do a little like paint pull around or turn around, pull up kind of jumper, but for the most part, they're looking to get open looks from, and they're the best team in the country at avoiding turnovers. So they're going to take care of the ball. They value possessions. They hunt for good shots, but they're not going to put a ton of rim pressure on Purdue's defense, which should help guys stay out of foul trouble and should help Purdue's rebounding a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've done this, but their conference only KenPom page is a fascinating read, especially on the offensive side. They have 4 different categories on the offensive side where they are number 1 in the conference and conference play in those categories. And they have 2 where they're 18th. I mean, they are very, very drastic and very intentional. They are the best team in the conference at taking care of the ball. They make their free throws. They're the best 3-point shooting team in the conference through conference play. And they really avoid live ball turnovers, especially. They have the lowest steal percentage on offense of any team in the Big Ten. And, I mean, you mentioned it. They're 18th in the conference in offensive rebounding and 18th in the conference in free throw rate. So this is a team that really does not attack the rim. They don't attack the offensive glass, but they get a lot of wide open good looks from three. And not only they get a lot of them, they make a lot of them. And that's a dangerous, dangerous game to play with a Purdue team who pretty clearly is willing to give up good looks from three.
Yeah, and on the other side, Nebraska's 3-point defense is pretty good. Which might seem counterintuitive to how we just described their defense, but that goes back to what you said about how selective they are at leaving guys. Like, they know the assignment. They know this guy's a low volume shooter or this guy's not a good shooter. We can leave him to apply pressure, but they are excellent in rotation. If you watch Nebraska tape, they are flying around the court. They are not going to let guys just sit there and shoot open looks. There's always going to be a guy running at them. They're going to try and force as many extra passes as possible. And if a guy isn't comfortable taking a shot quickly, he's not going to get an opportunity to take one. And that's going to be paramount for guys like we mentioned, like Shakari Harris and Jack Benner. When they catch the ball and they have an open look, to shoot it. Don't hesitate, because that window is going to close very quickly. Nebraska is just, they play so hard defensively. And it's different than past Hoiberg teams where it's felt a little bit gimmicky, their defense. They, like when they played Purdue, they put 3 guys on Edey, 2 guys on Braden Smith, and just sort of let anyone else take the shots they wanted. And Purdue couldn't make them in that game. But that's not necessarily like a repeatable, reliable defensive strategy. Kind of like we talked about with Purdue, if they're going to let guys take the shots they want to take, sometimes they're going to make them. This year, Nebraska's a lot better at making those guys, even the ones they're willing to take shots, those will be the guys that get the easiest looks, but they're not easy looks.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think this could be a big game for small ball lineups. Like, I think this Nebraska defense changes its luster when it's facing a lineup of guys like Braden, Fletcher, CJ Benter, and Trey Kaufman-Renn. I mean, you surround Trey Kaufman-Renn with 40% level 3-point shooters. I know CJ's been down in conference play, but throughout the first year and a half of his career, he's been a 40% guy up until the last month or so. And I mean, Jack Benner, throughout the first half year of his career, has largely been a good shooter and was billed as an elite shooter coming out of high school. Like, I think that defense changes how dangerous it can be, because all of a sudden you're now getting some really high level shooters open looks. And this would be a great game for CJ, who I think his shot selection has been a little tougher recently. I think teams have started to respect him more as a shooter, as he's been consistently so high level on wide open shots. But this is a game where I think he's going to be back to the wide open looks. And if he can really get going again, that would be huge for this Purdue team. I mean, him and Jack Benner hitting 8 threes combined in this game somehow would I think propel Purdue to really high levels. And I don't think that's out of the question the way that Nebraska is going to guard them.
Yeah. I mean, this is just going to be a game where Purdue's role players have to make shots. If you've watched Nebraska games, this is what they do. They take a lot of threes and they allow their opponents to take a ton of threes. And when I say allow, they force their opponents to take a lot of threes. It's a little bit different than, we'll let them take the shots. Like, they want opponents shooting threes, and they're going to make those threes as hectic and chaotic and noisy as possible and try and disrupt the rhythm and flow of guys who aren't necessarily comfortable taking a ton of shots. And in 2 games against Illinois, another very good shooting team, 2 very close games, they split the series. Each road team won, interestingly enough. That's what it turned into. It was a 3-point shooting contest. In the first game, Nebraska was a little bit better than Illinois. In the second game, Illinois was a little bit better than Nebraska. And, there's an opportunity for Purdue here. I think they're a better rebounding team than Nebraska, in theory at least, on the season. Now, recently, Nebraska's maybe had an edge there, at least defensive rebounding wise. They're a pretty good defensive rebounding team, but Purdue's going to have to find ways to manufacture some offense, because on paper at least, you don't necessarily want your offense running through your role player 3-point shooters.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the idea of having a 3-star trio like this, especially with 2 guys that are as good as shooters as Braden and Fletcher are, is that you can, I think, force this Nebraska defense to try and guard 3-man actions on one side of the floor at times. And if you do that, I think you can manufacture some easier looks for your stars. And this might even be a game where we have a lot of like Trey Kaufman-Renn post touches and force Nebraska to collapse on that, force them to bring 3 guys down and be scrambling all over the place to try and recover to shooters, because that's how you force this Nebraska defense into true bad rotations, is not off of just like dribble drives and getting one guy to collapse, but it's getting the ball in deep to good post threats and dominant post threats and forcing 3 or 4 guys to collapse on the ball, because they will do that. They will send 3 guys, like you said, against Edey. They do that this year still. They do that against good post players when they get the ball inside. And I think if you could force them to do that a little bit at times, you can force some bad rotations and find some open Braden and Fletcher shots. And I mean, we all know what those guys can do when they get going.
Yeah, you mentioned this could be a big game for small ball. I think playing Trey Kaufman at the 5 is really going to be a look Purdue might go to consistently. Nebraska doesn't have a ton of size. Like Rick Mast and Birkday Buchengel are very good players, but they don't have like an overwhelmingly physically dominant front court, and that might open the door for Purdue to play Trey at the 5 and Bencher at the 4. And there's also could be a Jacobson game. If Purdue doesn't necessarily want to do that as much, just play Jacobson more. In theory, at least, you're going to be forcing one of Nebraska's bigs to come out and guard with a 3-point line just a little bit, which could help unclog things in the paint for Trey. This could be another triple-double watch game for Trey. I don't know if he'll ever actually get one, but it wouldn't surprise me if he has like 8, 10, and 7 in this game. If guys are making shots, like it feels like one of those kind of games where, ironically, points might be the toughest for him to come by in the double-digit figures because they're really going to try hard to deny him. But you mentioned some like the 3-man actions. Nebraska, we've talked about it at nauseum at this point. They're very disciplined in who they help off of. They're not going to leave Fletcher Lawyer alone. But you can try and force their hand. If you can run some 2-man game actions, maybe to the weak side of the floor, get him, put Fletcher in the corner, get Trey the ball on the block, and force the help to come from that side of the floor. Force them to decide if they're going to, especially if you have, Braden on the opposite wing, so you can't bring guys from that quick. You're either bringing them from the opposite corner, or you're taking the guy, which is a long way to go, or you're taking the guy off of Fletch and force them to decide if they're going to let Trey go one-on-one or they're going to give Fletch a look from 3. And either, I think, is a shot Purdue's comfortable with.
And I think I had a realization that I wasn't prepared for coming into this game, but I think this could possibly be a big Omer Mayer game. I think this could be a big Omer Mayer and Braden Smith playing together game. I think especially if you see a guy like CJ maybe not hit a shot early in this game. I mean, if he misses a couple early ones, I think you may see Purdue turn to putting the ball in Omer's hands a little bit and almost using Braden as an off-ball shooter, because if you stick Braden and Fletch on the wings and put the ball in Omer's hands, he's a good enough passer to kind of play make out of that. And I think adds a wrinkle to the Purdue offense that was talked about earlier this year that we haven't really seen. And it really puts that Nebraska defense in a tough situation there again when the 2 guys on the wings are the 2 guys you don't want to help off of. That makes that no-middle defense a lot more difficult to play and a lot more nuanced. And I trust this Purdue staff. I trust PJ Thompson to really run some excellent offensive action and throw some wrinkles at this Nebraska defense, because I'm sure they'll throw some wrinkles at Purdue. But I think that about covers every side of this game, moves us into a good spot for predictions. Ken Palm currently has this game predicted as a 2-point win for Nebraska on the road at Pinnacle Bank. This is one of the biggest games of the year for Purdue. Team really could use a big statement win, I think. That Texas Tech win has gone up and down. The Alabama win isn't carrying quite as much weight as it did earlier this year. A statement win on the road against a conference rival that is 21-2 this year, going into this game, I think could do wonders for this Purdue team. So how do you have this game going? Do you think Purdue is able to pull it out, or do you think Nebraska's 2-point prediction holds true?
I'm going to take Nebraska in this game. I'm going to take them to cover that 2 points. I do not trust this Purdue defense to do anything against Nebraska. I think it's going to come down to a 3-point shooting contest like all Nebraska games do, but it's going to come down to guys like CJ Cox and Jakari Harris trying to outshoot the likes of Sam Hoiberg and Price Sanford. Because as much as Nebraska is very disciplined at, getting the shots to funneling the shots to the low percentage shooters they want taking them, and then making the shots a little bit more difficult than they might look as soon as you catch the ball, Purdue is not. I don't think they're really going to be able to stay connected to Price Sanford. Purdue's going to be having to chase over so many screens. They do so much off-ball movement. It's almost like very Klay Thompson, Steph Curry Warriors, as we're defense that were just exhausted, constantly chasing those guys around the perimeter, and so many cuts and screens, and all of a sudden one of them is wide open on the wing coming off a screen, and your guy just can't get there fast enough. That's a lot of what the Nebraska offense does, and less complicated and less talented offenses have given Purdue fits defensively. I think they're just really going to struggle. And if Purdue isn't shooting to keep up with Nebraska, this game could kind of get away from them, especially in the second half. So give me Nebraska like 84-78. I'll say it's about 6 points, but maybe Purdue hits a shot late to make it a little closer than the game actually was.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reason to point towards a Nebraska win, especially with it being on the road at Pinnacle Bank. I think I'm going to go against the logic, and I'm going to take Purdue here. I think this is a game. This is the bounce back spot. I think, like we saw the big win against Maryland, we saw the survival against Oregon. I think this is the game where Purdue's big three, especially, really comes through. Like I think Fletcher and Trey Kaufman run build off of a couple of positive performances that they've had in the last two games, and carry that into another really strong performance. And I think we get a response from Braden Smith. I don't think we talked enough about the rebounding edge that I think Purdue will have in this game. This is a Nebraska team who doesn't even attempt to offensive rebound. I think Purdue will do pretty well in controlling the glass. And this is a good but not great defensive rebounding team in Nebraska. I think Purdue can control the glass on both sides. And, if that happens, I think we get a bounce back game from Braden Smith, especially turnovers wise, taking care of the ball. I think we get a good performance from him. I think we see a few role players hit a couple shots. I don't know if it's the hottest game from role players, but I think they do enough to get a gritty win in a game that I think is really defined by the three stars, and almost a way that we saw last year, and where it was like there were times where the three stars were just good enough to go get a win. I think there's a world where Purdue has the three best players on the floor tomorrow. I don't know if that always is the case. I mean, obviously, Nebraska has some really good players as well, but I think there's a world tomorrow night where we're watching that game and we come away thinking that Purdue has the three best players on the floor. And I think that holds true. And Purdue gets a really gritty, like 6 point win in Lincoln that I think is up and down, back and forth, really well played game, and maybe some late game free throws push the lead to like 6, 7, 8 points, and Purdue wins like 74-68.
I mean, if that happened, that would launch Purdue right back into the discussion for Big Ten race. I mean, they're 2 games behind Michigan right now. Illinois is at 2 losses. Nebraska's at 2 losses. This would put them to 3, right, with Purdue and Michigan State. So, yeah, I mean, there's really 5 teams very competitive in the Big Ten race right now, and a 4th loss would put Purdue at a pretty big disadvantage going in the stretch. And with only 7 games left after that, you might kind of put to rest the idea that Purdue is going to win the Big Ten, at least outright. I mean, there's a backdoor tie in there somewhere, but this is a big game. We didn't really talk about the spot as much, but this is a big game for Purdue's Big Ten chances. And also, like you said, Purdue doesn't really have a signature conference win, and their 2 big non-conference wins are probably like top 25 level teams, not like top 10 level teams.
Yeah, for sure. This is definitely a big spot for Purdue. Good chance to respond and a good chance to, I think, put a couple of narratives to bed and kind of calm everybody down and calm the conversations down around this team. So, as always, be tuned in. We will have a recap after this game. Be sure to be on the lookout for that. And otherwise, thanks for listening. Hopefully, we get a big time response from Purdue on Tuesday night.